if you could go back and redo one of them, which one would you do?
That's a loaded question. That's implying that we fucked up one of them.
Remakes are done all the time.
Seriously though, I think the one that I do regret not having enough time to do properly was The New Frontier. I feel like we tried to cram too much story into too small a space. There was too much good source material that we couldn't even go near because it was just too limited a time. So that's the one that I wish we'd had a chance to do a do-over.
After being such a huge part of the DC animated universe for so many years, it's been like to kind of now move toward these kind of more one-off ones.
It's been fun. It's different. It's kind of apples and oranges. I mean, doing a TV series is its own thing. It's you kind of hit a rhythm. Every week you're breaking a new story and putting a new story into development. You don't really have time to overthink things. Whereas with the movies, you do have a little bit more time to kind of fine tune the storyline and other parts of production. Also, when you're doing the TV show, you have a kind of a built-in continuity, so you don't always have to kind of be constantly reintroducing characters or explaining things. You can kind of ping pong off of things that happened 3 episodes ago. Whereas with the movies, they are technically more, except the movies that James is doing are more continuity based. But, the ones I've been doing are more kind of standalone. So it's a little bit more challenging in terms of doing a contained story. But it's just like I said, it's apples and oranges. They're both good.
Superheroes have been the focus so far in the DC animated universe.
Sure.
What about Vertigo?
What about Vertigo? That's a good question. It comes up for discussion quite often. I have nothing concrete to report at the time, but at this moment. But it's certainly something that we would love to explore. The challenge of Vertigo is that a lot of the stories, well, they're not action stories. We'll talk sometimes about like, oh yeah, what if we did a Sandman story? It's like, yeah, what's a Sandman story? And it's like, well, it's not an action story. It doesn't end with like a big action explosion finale. So that would be great. It'd be really fun to explore different kinds of stories. So it's certainly something we're thinking about.
Are there any actors, voice actors, that kind of surprised you with how much they got into and like kind of understood their character without necessarily being, a gigantic fan before? Not to say they didn't like them, but maybe they just weren't super familiar. But now you're like, oh, that is the, Green Lantern or Superman.
That's a really good question. Well, it's tricky because Nathan Fillion was like perfect to play Hal Jordan. But he really is kind of a nerd.
Right,
He kind of understood the character before we even sat down and talked to him. Saying, "This is what he's all about." He's like, "Yeah, I know."
Right.
So, and he kind of got it. But beyond that, it was interesting working with Peter Weller on the Dark Knight movies. It's not that he was really into the character, but he understood the character, and he had actually he had done the one of the RoboCop movies with Frank Miller, so he became good friends with Frank. So. So he got it like instantly. It didn't have to explain a lot of the story to him, and he was a lot of fun to work with.
Would you like to see a return of the DC Showcase shorts?
I would love to see a return of the DC Showcase shorts. I've been asked that question a lot today. In the 30 movie history of doing these movies, that was one of my favorite things, was getting to do those little movies with characters like Jonah Hex and the Spectre. It was really fun to kind of take a little bit of a break from spandex and big, larger-than-life adventures. Getting to do just a kind of a weird spaghetti western kind of thing, and a weird 70s cop drama with John Carpenter 80s horror elements was really fun. So there's been some talk about possibly going back and doing more things like that. What's great about it is that it gives us a chance to explore characters who aren't named Batman or Superman or Wonder Woman, or even Green Lantern or Flash or Aquaman. So and explore different genres that aren't superheroes. So that's something that it'd be really nice to do more of that in the future.
How does it feel for someone of my generation, like growing up watching the Batman animated series? That's my Batman.
Okay.
Before, I mean, it's after Adam West and before the current incarnations of Batman. Like Kevin Conroy's will always be my Batman. these movies are for a certain generation. This is their definitive superhero. Do you feel that weight on the shoulders when you put it out? I'm just going to put out a good product and wherever let it fall.
Yeah, I don't. I try not to think about that weight. I mean, it's really flattering and it is kind of humbling that there's an entire generation of people who kind of grew up with my Batman the way I grew up with Adam West as Batman. So it's great, but at the same time, I can't feel tied down by that. So with these movies, especially, they're intended for a completely different kind of viewing experience. So
Well, I love how the movies grew up with the audience. As in, I grew up watching Batman the Animated Series after school, and then then the movies. And now that I'm older, I'm seeing the movies, and they're more mature.
Yeah.
But it's some of the same voices, some of the same style.
Yeah.
And it really. I love it. I mean, I'm sorry, that's not really a question. Thank you for your work. Thank you for the Timberverse.
You're very welcome.
A lot of the feedback we've been getting from, or a lot of the conversations we've been getting from some of the other team members we've talked to, is that feedback from audiences is critical in terms of kind of driving what stories you guys are saying. People want to hear this, not necessarily from fans, but a lot of the times it's you guys pitching for different, I really liked, Justice League Dark, whatever. Are there stories that come up constantly from fans? Not saying necessarily we're doing X, but saying, what we hear every week is this.
Yes.
What are those? Can you tell us?
What are they?
Yeah, can you tell us?
I'll tell you the one. The one that we hear all the time is Kingdom Come.
Oh.
And I have to crush everybody's dream every single time because it's just not within the scope of what we can do with these movies. The main thing that people remember about Kingdom Come, beyond the story, is the look. It's Alex Ross. It was Alex Ross, breaking big, doing quote-unquote photorealistic superheroes. So if we did an animated version of Kingdom Come, it would not look like that.
Right.
We don't have the money. There's not enough money on the planet to make it look like that. So there's really no reason to do it. People would just be, automatically they'd be disappointed. That'd be the number one thing on Amazon, and the Amazon reviews would be, 1 star. Doesn't look like Alex Ross.
Right.
So there's that's the main thing.
That makes sense.
Does it feel after 10 years that the stuff's become, it was always a bit more legitimised, and seen some kind of like everything its own right. When it started, there was still an audience, but now you've got a decade of history, so it obviously has a very unique position in kind of the Warner Brothers calendar.
Yeah. It's interesting. I always kind of knew that the movies were going to do well because, even going back to the very first one, the Superman Doomsday,
Yes.
there had been, people who loved the TV shows that we did, but I could always kind of tell that people were like, oh, if only they could, go a little bit beyond the violence that they do, that they're constantly having to cut away or, not show any blood or, people have to say good Lord instead of oh my God or damn, whatever. So when we did the very first one, I remember when we screened it at Comic-Con, and the very first really super violent act that happened was Doomsday came to Earth and he killed the deer on screen. And the audience went, yeah! And I was just like, holy cow. It's like, I knew they were going to be, into the, the little bit more level of violence, but just killed a deer, you should be like, oh, sad. But, so we were aware that there was definitely a thirst, amongst the fan base for stuff that was A, a little bit more adult oriented, and B, a little bit more directly based on the comics.
This was brought up earlier, but what was the discussion process, the creative process in adding the new material at the beginning of the Killing Joke?
Well, we knew the storyline was not long enough to do as a 70-minute movie, so Alan Burnett and Brian Azzarello and I, we had a brainstorming session over the phone, and we said, okay, it should be this, it shouldn't be this, it shouldn't be this, it shouldn't be this. We decided it shouldn't be a supervillain story, because whichever supervillain it is going to pale compared to the Joker, who's going to show up in the second half of the story. We didn't necessarily want to expand any part of the Joker story. This is my last question. We wanted to basically set up Barbara and Batgirl, and we said, well, so
in The Killing Joke, it's a little bit vague whether she actually still is Batgirl or whether she's retired as Batgirl. You only ever see her in her civilian clothes. So we had some questions there that we felt like we needed to kind of maybe address. And we came up with a story that we thought was a pretty good story, and a lot of people didn't like it. Sometimes sometimes you don't always hit a home run.
So you're looking more at just driving the choice of Barbara retiring.
Basically, that's basically where it was. Yeah. Thank you for answering your own question. I did such a poor job of it. All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.